Hey, ladies and gents, welcome to the Controlled Interest Gamecast, where we talk about video games and everything happening in the industry, episode 96. As always, I'm not joined by either Dom or Jordan. Neither of them could be here this week, but I do have a special guest. Logan has returned.
Hi, I've returned to podcasting as a whole.
Yeah.
This is weird.
Glad to have you back.
Good to be back.
I don't track like every time people are on the podcast, but I think Blessing holds the record for the most times on because he was on before you were. And then I think it's you like 4 times.
I think this is fourth. Sounds right, at least.
Yeah, I've lost track. You and him are the two people we get on most of the time. Because I don't know, just like having you guys on.
We're the most knowledgeable about video games.
Yes, 100%. Especially with like specifically like PlayStation and stuff too, because we already don't have 2 of our 3 members that are PlayStation centric. So I need another one, just in case. But yeah, good to have you back on. Dom was meant to be on. We had some last second stuff come up and he wasn't able to be on. So it's just going to be another, as Jordan calls it, a fireside groove with me and Logan.
We've done this before. I mentioned that to you, but I think this is because I had you fill on my podcast back in the day for the first time. And I think that was the first time we ever podcasted together, was you and me together solo.
Yeah,
so we've done it before.
Yeah, we have a nice rapport going, so it's good. This is the first time a guest has been on our podcast, and it'd be a 2-man podcast. So we're breaking new ground, Logan.
There we go.
But yeah, so the way we normally start off is what we've been playing. I have a weird list of like, so I've played some Wolfenstein 2. I haven't garnered enough time, like free time, to like sit down and just focus on finishing it. Not that I dislike it or anything. I love Wolfenstein 2. Everything I've played. It's just one of those games that I haven't had an opportunity to get back to fully. But over the last week, I've played a game called Monster Prom. I don't know if you're familiar with that, Logan.
Oh, yeah. I played that at E3 last year, an early build of it, and it's really fun.
Yeah,
I like
we were fortunate enough to get a review copy to check out the game. And I actually, as of recording this today, it's live on our YouTube channel if you're listening to this the day the podcast comes out on Monday. I put up an impressions video of Monster Prom. I am not a dating simulator kind of guy, shockingly enough. The only other game that's partially like that I've played is Doki Doki Literature Club, which was the indie game at the end of last year that kind of caught the gaming industry by storm. People were talking about it. Very crazy game. I don't want to spoil it for anybody who's played it, but it's definitely an interesting game.
I still got to play that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's you're probably like me and you don't really play dating sims.
Yeah, I do not play a dating sims too often. I've heard enough about Doki Doki Literature Club and what it's all about to garner my interest. I just need to actually play it at some point.
Yeah. It subverts expectations. It does a lot of crazy stuff. Really surprising. Monster Prom is, I think, a very good intro to that kind of game because the aesthetic is very inviting. It isn't super anime, and that isn't necessarily a bad thing, but for like a more general audience, that can be a little off-putting. The art style for this game, like you said, you played an early build of it. I looked up some early shots of it when it was making the rounds at conventions, and it definitely looks different in its end product, especially a lot of the final graphics they used for like in between scenes, you can select where you want to go at in the school. Like if you want to go to the gym or the auditorium, that looks completely different than what the early build looked like. Because I really like the way it looks, and I went and looked at the early builds. It doesn't look bad necessarily, but it does look different. And yeah, in my impressions, I talk about how it's very inviting for somebody who's not familiar with dating sims. It's very easy to pick up. I love that they have multiple options for playing through the game. So they have a quick option where you can get through a scenario or a story in about 30 minutes, and they have one that's about an hour to an hour and a half. And that's great because people who are new to it don't want to commit that kind of time to something they want to see it end right. And with this game, it's very replayable because the whole point of it is you trying to find a date for Monster Prom, and if it doesn't happen, you unlock certain additional avenues to get these people to like you. You unlock new information about those characters by talking to them. At the end of a playthrough, it lets you know all of the new paths you've unlocked, all of the new dialogue options you've unlocked. I just really like the customizable parts of it, where at the beginning of the game, you select your character. You have 1 of 4 characters to choose from, 2 female, 2 male, but you can choose your pronouns, which is really great for people who want that in games. And you can name it or you go with the default name, and you go through like this personality quiz that kind of sets up your initial stats in the game. and those range from your intellectual level to the amount of money you have, and all of them I think factor in, from what I've played, into the characters liking you, the AI characters, and they're all based on monsters. You have a football player who's a werewolf. You have a Gorgon kind of gothic chick. You have like a preppy ghost girl. You have like a really like how would I say it, very like fashion forward demon type character.
Yeah.
And like all of that stuff sounds very weird, but it works. All of them have their own unique personalities. Through the conversations you have with these characters, you're making choices, and what you're trying to do is make them like you more. So it totally fits into the way a lot of people were in high school. If you made a lot of your choices not necessarily based on what you wanted to do, but based on how other people would perceive your actions. And it's really cool because it has a lot of world building in it too, which is surprising for a dating sim. You find out about the principal and how easily he is to manipulate and what's going on, and the rules that they can break in this monster world. Like they don't approach situations the way a normal human would. It's very interesting. I've enjoyed my time with it. Honestly, I thought it would be one of those things that I played for maybe a good 3 to 4 hours to get initial impressions on it and never touch it again because it's a dating sim and I don't play those games. But it is something I might go back to and just do a couple of run-throughs again. It seems like it's very open to whatever type of sexual preference you are or anything like that. So obviously I'm just a normal straight dude. So the way I played it was as a guy going after girls in the game. But you can do any number of things in there. You can go after everybody. You can go after nobody. I just love the variety of choice, and the art style is great. When you've played it, Logan, were you able to get through like an entire little campaign thing?
Yeah, I think we did one of the short ones because
Okay.
we played it at like an indie like showcase thing. So it was like each session was maybe 10 minutes or so, something like that.
Okay.
I really liked how it like subverted your expectations. If I remember right,
Yeah.
It's been almost a year since I played it.
It
but,
does
like,
that fully. Yep.
Yeah, you'll choose options that you think are like the correct one in the moment or whatever, or you think it's the option that you're wanting to choose, and then all of a sudden it kind of flips itself on its head and a scenario plays out that you totally didn't expect. So it's really funny in that way. The one thing I'm curious if it changes a lot, because in our build that we played, it was once you had kind of seen the different scenarios that play out, you kind of learned that they were all pretty similar. I'm curious if it's drastically different in the full game. But yeah, it's a really funny game. The writing's really witty. I enjoyed checking it out last year, and I think I've heard a lot of positive buzz about the full game, not only from yourself but from a lot of other people.
So I can't really speak to how different it is, obviously, from that build because I didn't play that build. But from what I did experience, I played through it fully, I think 3 or 4 times, and each time I made it a point to pursue a different character. And from what I noticed is at certain sections of the game, there's definitely events that will always be the same, right? Like there's definitely tentpoles for specific characters. But in between those, they change up a lot, and I guess the way they play it out is that they assume that you're not going to be playing through pursuing the same character over and over again after you succeed, right? So you'll play through. If you don't succeed, you might pursue that same character until you succeed and figure out how to get them to like you and go to prom with you. But I highly doubt that they built a game in mind of somebody playing through, having a successful journey with that specific AI character, let's say the ghost girl, for instance, and then constantly playing over and over again trying to get the ghost girl again. So I guess if you were trying to do that, it would probably get repetitive. But the way I played it is like, I wasn't successful. I played through till I was successful, learning like what worked and what didn't work for that specific character, and then I moved on. So I guess it could feel a little bit samey if you're trying to be successful over and over again with the same character, which would be weird considering it's a dating sim with a bunch of different characters. What I do know is that there are secret characters that you can romantically pursue as well that aren't the initial, I want to say 6 that they show you. There's a couple of secret ones that you can pursue too. Through different actions, which is pretty cool for people who want to get the most out of it and find all the hidden secrets. The thing that initially interested me about this game is that one of the main producers of the game is Jesse Cox, who Jesse Cox is a very huge YouTuber and Twitch streamer, and he's somebody that I've seen some of his videos, and we have very similar tastes in humor. So I knew when he was confident enough to put his money behind it and his mouth and his marketing and let people know that he evangelized this game, I was like, I definitely want to give it a chance, because he's not somebody who plays dating sims all the time. He's just, a Joe Schmo gamer that people like to watch, but hearing him want to be a producer of this game really said something. And the reason I asked if you had played fully through is that I don't know if this was in that build that you played. The final song that they play at the end of the game is a really good song. It's really catchy. I don't even know the name of it off the top of my head, but it definitely rings as if you're watching a teenage movie, a high school rom-com from like the 90s, and like there's that whole culmination at the end of the movie that ends in like an upbeat, punkish, rockish kind of song. It definitely has that flair to it.
Yeah.
It's just it's a solid game. It's very cheap too. I think it's like $12. So it's a low barrier of entry. And if you want any more thoughts, more concise written out thoughts, I do have an impressions video up that's about, I think, like 5 or 6 minutes long on our YouTube channel. So definitely check that out if you want more condensed, precise thoughts on Monster Prom. The other game I played was Lightfall. I don't know if you're familiar with Lightfall.
Yeah, I'm familiar with this. I haven't played it myself, though.
So a lot of positives and a lot of negatives, I think. Maybe not a lot of negatives. So I'm very particular with platformers. I have a very finite way I like things to control, especially in platformers. And my biggest... I want to get the concern and the problems with that out of the way, because there's so much I love about the game. My issue with the game is that it's very floaty for me. I think the platforming is way too floaty for my tastes. But the reason it is floaty is because the main mechanic of the game is you producing these spheres below you. Sorry, not spheres, cubes below you that help you traverse. And like any platformer, as you go on, the levels get more difficult, and you have to get comfortable with that mechanic. I just don't like floaty platformers. It's just something about me. I'm trying to think of the name of it. The developers behind Housemarque, what was their platformer that they had on Xbox? I can't remember the name of it.
Outland.
I tried Outland because I respect Housemarque and I think they make great games. And I was like, oh, I'll check out Outland. It was actually, I think, free on Xbox Games with Gold last year sometime. Couldn't get into it. It's way too floaty. I'm very particular about platformers, and like floaty platformers, I have a really tough time enjoying. Not that they're like difficult or anything. I just don't like the movie.
No, I agree with you. I think, I'm kind of specific with my platformers as well. Like Super Meat Boy is like a really good platformer, and I acknowledge that. But I always felt like it felt kind of too loose at times, almost like like you're out of control. I understand what you mean. So you're probably not a big fan of Little Big Planet and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, I think Little Big Planet works because they set up the world in a way of like they're these like very toy-looking characters that it would make sense for them to move in a floaty fashion. For me, with Lightfall, the character is like this little like demon light guy. It reminds me a lot of Ori from Ori and the Blind Forest, though he's more like a lemur thing, but like kind of the same thing. And Ori has very tight, very specific controls, whereas with Lightfall, it doesn't match the character. And the other problem I have is that for a game with a lot of amazing animations, like if you're sprinting on the ground with this character, he ducks down and does like the classic trope anime run with his head down and his arms behind his back.
Yeah.
And it looks really cool and it feels really cool. Oh, so in terms of like wall jumping, early in the game they kind of showcase through gameplay design that like wall jumping is very important. And there isn't really a lot of animation to it. Even with like when you're holding onto ledges, there's just no animations there, and it feels, I don't want to say cheap because that's the wrong way to put it, but it doesn't feel fully polished.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a letdown there too because you expect those kind of things. What I do want to say is like the art style is tremendous. Like the art in this game is beautiful, and if you're somebody who looks at indie games for the art aspect, I would totally look at it. I'm looking to write up an impressions video later this week, so that should be up. But yeah, Lightfall is all art and not a whole lot of substance to me, which is a shame. But man, the game is beautiful. I just am not a huge fan of the gameplay specifically. So
Yeah, I was interested in it. I kind of had it on my radar. It's been out for like a week now. I haven't really heard any buzz from people or seen many impressions. I need to, I don't know. Obviously, yours are the first impressions I've heard, but yeah, it was one of those games that I wanted to check out when I was at PAX a couple of weeks ago, and I just never got the chance. But yeah, I haven't heard a whole lot of buzz since it's come out, so I didn't know if it was just like there was a negative response to it, or if it was just kind of like I don't know. I just have not heard much about it, so I kind of have been interested in looking things up about that. So
Yeah,
I appreciate your own take on it.
I don't want to be overly negative. I think it's a good game. I think it's a decent game. I just don't think there's any aspect of it outside of its art direction that is like great.
Yeah,
and it's kind of a shame because when you see the game and you see the cutscenes, like every cutscene in this game looks like a piece of art you'd find on like DeviantArt or just anywhere. Really, like it's a very beautiful game. It's
I heard similar things earlier in the year about Faye, that EA indie game that came out. If you know what I'm talking about, about a lot of people said it was like gorgeous, but it wasn't like the most fun to play necessarily.
Yeah,
so.
And Lightfall is interesting because I don't know if somebody who picks up this game who enjoys floaty type platformers would love it, right? I don't know if they just fall in love with it. For me, it just doesn't work. And it sucks too because there's even more context in terms of it being floaty because you can't have a super precise, quick moving platformer where you produce blocks underneath you because I think that'd be a lot harder for it to work, especially in more difficult areas. So you need it to be a little bit more floaty. But it doesn't work for me fully. There's the narrator's really funny and really interesting. The lore and the story isn't really, it's like kind of cookie cutter to be quite honest. I would definitely suggest if you can get this game on a sale on Switch. I think it's a really fun Switch game to pick up and play, and just have fun with. I don't know if this will be in the conversation for any type of awards at the end of the year. If it is, it's definitely the art direction. Like I said, I'll say it again, this game is very beautiful. It is a Kickstarter game. It is their first game, so I'm not, I wouldn't assume that this is going to be a grand old thing out of the gate. I am interested to see what their follow-up to this is, because they definitely know how to make a game look beautiful. I think it's just them having to tweak gameplay. And once again, like I said, I think the gameplay makes sense in the context of the other mechanics in the game. It just didn't work for me at all. And I'll talk about it more in my impressions video, but that's pretty much all I have to say about Lightfall and Monster Prom. What did you play this week?
Only God of War. I'm still into that. I beat God of War within like a day and a half. That's how quickly I beat that game. And it's now been out for, is it 2 weeks or 3? I guess it's been out for 2 weeks now. And still have not stopped playing that game. I'm trying to get the platinum. I am getting close-ish. There's a lot of post-game content to that video game, and I am enjoying all of it thoroughly. So once I finally clear that out, then I will move on to whatever else. I don't really feel like a desire to move on to anything else right now. Not just. I mean, part of that is because I am still so in love with everything God of War is doing. I think it's safe to say that that's probably one of my favorite video games of all time at this point. That's how much I've enjoyed it. But yeah, there's just really nothing else out that I'm feeling a need to play right now. Far Cry came out and that totally bounced off me. I did not enjoy my time with Far Cry at all. And then, there's just not been too much else happening right now. There's a couple things on the horizon that I'm looking at. Namely, I guess Dark Souls at the end of this month. I would love to get into the remaster. But yeah, other than that, it's mainly just been more God of War for me, which I'm sure you guys have talked about on this show already in the past.
Yeah. Oh, so actually last week Dom talked about Dom's finished the game. Jordan, I think, is like, I want to say like 9 or 10 hours in. Mm-hmm. They had a conversation the week it came out talking about the game in general, and they were both thumbs up on it. Last week Dom discussed that he felt that this God of War was the best game of this generation, which is surprising coming from him because he's a huge advocate for Bloodborne, and it was very interesting to hear his perspective on that. The interesting thing too with us is that Jordan loves the original trilogy of God of War games. he loves mostly the gameplay. Like, obviously, he's not saying that this story is crazy, phenomenal, or anything, but he really appreciates the specific and unique gameplay that God of War brought. And I think that's his biggest hang-up with God of War, is that not that the combat is necessarily different, he just doesn't think it's as fulfilling as a lot of other people are saying. He just wishes there were some tweaks there. Dom seems like he's in love with it. He has nothing but glowing praise for the game in general. So,
yeah, I still am. I think I might be reaching a slight fatigue point with the combat, but it has taken me, I don't know, 40, 50 hours to get to that point. So that's a good thing. And even then, like, I'm still enjoying chucking the axe and calling it back. Like, there's still so many little satisfying things in that game that even as much as I have played now, I am still getting tons of thorough enjoyment out of. I think as far as it being like the best game this generation, I've been working through those same thoughts and feelings myself. I think it could be. On my short list would be that, Bloodborne. Even though I never finished it, I'd have to say The Witcher 3 is obviously like one of the standout games of this generation. And then I don't know what we're considering Switch games. Like, maybe Breath of the Wild's up there. I don't know. I fluctuate on Breath of the Wild depending on the day. I love that game, but I don't know, with distance, I've kind of cooled off on it just a little bit. But yeah, I think God of War could be the best game this generation. I don't know. It's very hard to decide, and I haven't even given that given that thought too much. I haven't put too much into that thought yet. But yeah, it is. So you're finally getting a PS4, and you're getting it for Spider-Man, which is a good decision, by the way, because that will be. Here's how much I like God of War. I am more hyped for Spider-Man than any game that I have been in years. Spider-Man should hands down be my favorite game of the year. It probably will be my favorite game of the year until I played God of War, and now I think differently. And now I would be shocked if Spider-Man comes out and surpasses God of War for me. And that's coming from somebody who does not really like the old God of War games that much. Obviously, the combat's good, but like, I've never cared about that series really in any substantial way. So for this new one to come out and it like strike a chord with me that much means a lot. So you are in for a treat whenever you get your PS4. Try to hide yourself from spoilers if you can. I haven't seen too many floating around, but there are some very good moments in that game that I think. Like, you could obviously look up spoilers or whatever, or you could have it spoiled for you and still enjoy the game. But I think there's an appreciation with how Sony Santa Monica, like, reveals the different layers of what is going on in that game and in that world that I find really cool if you don't get it spoiled for you. So try to stay hidden if you can.
Well, I mean, I think it's going to be an uphill climb no matter what for Spider-Man, because I just think the very nature of the design of each of those games. Yeah. I think God of War, a more linearly structured game with heavy narrative elements, I think has a lot better chance of being an outstanding game than an open world game, because I think you have to check a lot more boxes in an open world game of trying to bring everything up to par. Yeah. And I'm not discounting God of War by any means.
Well, at the same time, though, like, Spider-Man 2 is like one of my 5 or 6 favorite video games ever. Like, I can't put into words how excited I am for Spider-Man. Yeah. Like, I think about that game a dozen times a day. I am so freaking excited to play that game. And it is like the only game I have, like, I feel like I'm getting jaded to a certain degree, or I don't get super hyped for video games anymore to come out. Like, obviously I'm still very excited to play them, and like, freaking, even with God of War, like, I took the day off work to play that. So I am still very much out here for video games, and I am loving video games. But I have not had like a genuine, like, in my gut excitement for a game in, I can't tell you how long, until Spider-Man. Yeah. And then for me to say, well, even to still be that excited about Spider-Man and know it's probably not going to surpass God of War for me is like kind of crazy. So, but we'll see.
I've only had that feeling, I think, a handful of times in my life in terms of getting that excited. I think it was like when Pokemon Red and Blue came out when I was younger. Off the top of my head, these are just some of the ones I remember. Like, I was super stoked for Oblivion when that Game Informer issue came out. the first Mass Effect, obviously. As of late, I think the only other one I can remember outside of what I feel for Spider-Man is Destiny. Before
The
we
first
knew what
one?
Destiny, yes, before we
Yeah.
actually knew what Destiny was, the hype surrounding that game, good lord, like I
There was
was
a
so
lot of
excited.
it.
Yeah,
I think I
and
pre-ordered that game like 3 years before it came out, 3 or 4 years before it came out.
I don't think you were alone. Like there, a lot of people did because they did an excellent job of building hype. Now the final result
Yeah.
of the game, hit or miss, obviously, but man, did they do a good job of building up what that game could possibly be.
Yeah.
Before we move on to news, you were talking about obviously the is this the game of the generation? For us, our game of the year in 2016 was Dark Souls 3. Our game of the year last year was Super Mario Odyssey. In terms of as a podcast group, Dom loved Breath of the Wild. Jordan and I, not so much.
Yeah.
I actually played Breath of the Wild for maybe 25 to 30 hours, and I was a hard out.
Yeah.
I play a lot of open world games, and though there are some interesting things that Breath of the Wild tackles, I just don't think it's as revolutionary as everybody likes to talk about. I think a lot of that is hyperbole to the max.
Yeah, I got kind of if I'm being completely honest, like I think Breath of the Wild is a phenomenal game, 10 out of 10. Like that's what
It's
I
a
would
great
score.
game, yeah.
But I got jaded with how people talked about it because, yeah, I'm right there with you. I think that game is absolutely wonderful, and it is hands down one of the best games of last year. But the hyperbole, yes, with that game, like, to talk about Max, my old co-host, or my friend, he's been on this show too. Right? Has he been on the show?
Oh yeah, he's been on the podcast.
Yeah, so Max played Breath of the Wild before Horizon. And so he after he played Breath of the Wild, and then he went to Horizon. He was like, "Yeah, I just don't think I can play Horizon anymore. I think Breath of the Wild broke open world games for me." I'm like, "How does it break open world games for you? It's doing something different, yes, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's how every open world game should be for the rest of forever." What that game does really well is allows you to explore, which is what Zelda games kind of have always, or going back to the original Zelda game, that's kind of what the purpose of the original Zelda game was, and they just honed back in on that. Everybody thinks that it was a very revolutionary thing for open world games as a whole, where I think it is just not every open world game is about exploring, and that was obviously the root element that Breath of the Wild went with, and I don't think that should be the root element of all open world games. Like, I don't know. Like it's fun. It's fun turning over stones in the world and finding things that nobody else has found and uploading a clip to Twitter or whatever and being like, "Wow, I didn't know you could do that." But like, it doesn't. I don't think it needs to drastically change open world games or anything like that.
And frankly, I think there's a lot of open world games that do a lot of things better than it does. And I like specific parts of it. My problem with Breath of the Wild, I don't want to go on a huge tangent because I've talked about it ad nauseum for a while, is like, for me, I love that the world is huge and expansive. It seems like it's, a lot of the time playing the game, it felt like it was big for the sake of being big. Like, I don't really think that the world is particularly interesting, in my opinion. Like,
kind of, yeah. I liked how big it was, though, on a personal note. Like,
yeah.
Again, to go back to that exploration thing, like, I think for the exploration to really work, you had to feel like you were in a world that was fully realized to a degree. So I think it almost had to be that size if they really wanted to get that effect properly.
Yeah, I just think like a lot of the areas are empty with very sparse areas of interest. The towns and places aren't really heavily populated, and the little amount of characters they have in areas, I personally didn't really find interesting or well written. And obviously this is a lot of like personal gripes. I do love the sheer spectacle of the divine beasts. I love the puzzle elements of that. Another huge problem I had with the game is the deteriorating like weapons and stuff. I didn't really gel with that in the way it worked with the game. You would go through these shrines and you would get this item, and it's like, oh, you got this upgraded version of a bow or sword. And I'm like, cool, I can use that like in 3 fights. Why should I care? Like,
yeah,
that was my biggest problem with it, is like, why should I care about any of these rewards if they're not gonna be around with me for a long time? And then obviously there's a whole philosophical argument there of like, well, yeah, just because something isn't with you the whole time, it doesn't mean it's not great. But it just seemed like a weird disconnect there of like, what's the point of me doing these more difficult shrines if this thing is going to be around with me a smidge longer than something else? they didn't correlate well with me. A lot of the game just didn't, and I think a lot of it was just people being so hyperbolic about the game. I think
there's some like very legitimate gripes that people can have with that game, and I understand everything you're saying right now, which then makes the hyperbole on the other side that much more. I don't want to say disingenuous, because if that's the opinion some people have about it, then so be it. But yeah, like I think there are some very legitimate gripes to potentially be had with that game. And again, like that's coming from somebody who personally said I'd probably give it a 10 out of 10 too if I was reviewing it. Like I think it is one of the standout games of the past few years. But there are flaws with it, I think, and a lot of it's preferential too. Like you didn't like the deteriorating weapon system. For some reason, I didn't find that annoying, and I hate that stuff normally. So
yeah,
I don't know. I could talk about this game for hours, because there's so many different avenues of it to analyze that people have talked about for the past year. Because that game's been out for over a year now. Jeez.
I played the game, obviously, for like 30 hours. I understand why it's great. I think it's a very solid game. I think it's a very well-built game. I would never say the game's bad by any means. It just, people talking about it revolutionizing a genre of video games, to me, it's like, oh, it revolutionized maybe Legend of Zelda as a franchise and showed you a new way that franchise can be explored in future games. It didn't really do that for me in open-world games. Like, I'm like, nothing here is necessarily new or crazy. It's just like all of them are working well together.
That was the takeaway I had as well. I felt like it was a bigger step for the franchise more than like the genre. So
for me, it's like, and you know, it's going to be a loose comparison, but for me, it's like if you played Assassin's Creed 2 and then jumped to Assassin's Creed Origins. Like Assassin's Creed 2, great game, right? Assassin's Creed Origins is the next step for that franchise, and you're kind of cutting out everything in between. I don't necessarily think it's, you know, Assassin's Creed 2 to like The Last of Us or Portal or something that like changed the game industry. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's a solid game. It just, we're a podcast that Dom loves Breath of the Wild, and Jordan and I respect that it's a good game, but we just weren't on the hype train. Like me and him just felt that Super Mario Odyssey just did so much more in a better way, and it approached what Zelda did, but in the opposite way of it kind of tightened up a Mario experience, and the levels weren't huge, but a lot of the areas of it were meaningful. And that's kind of why it was our personal game of the year. Like,
that was we had the exact same argument during our game of the year on MGS, which I'm sure you can go back and listen to. Yeah, we argued for like 40 minutes at the end between Super Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild. So that was fun. But Super Mario Odyssey eventually won. Yeah.
In terms of greatest games of the generation, my most underrated game, because I think, and we can go on to the news after this, I just want to say, my most underrated game, because we're going to be talking about them later in the news, is Quantum Break. I think that game got a bad rap because it was mixed in with all of the Microsoft, like, TV stuff, obviously, and, like, there's the television show in between the episodes. But if you take that game out of the context of being related to TV and all that stuff, it's a very solid game. Now, am I saying it's a 10 or a 9? No. But I think people trash on the game and act like it's a bad game. It's a very solid game. That game has some of the best graphics I've seen this generation in terms of just assets and the way things look, and some great performances. I forget the name of the actor, but the guy who plays Littlefinger in Game of Thrones is the main villain in Quantum Break, and I think he does a great job. I don't remember the actor who plays the lead character either. Ashton something.
Sean
Ashmore. Sean Ashmore, I think.
Is that it? Yeah.
Yeah. I think the time mechanics in the game are brilliant and stuff. I just think it's a unnecessarily bad rap, and unfortunately, Remedy has these games that come out and they don't sell well, right? They had Alan Wake, which I thought was a phenomenal game as well.
Alan Wake is awesome. Yeah. I loved Alan Wake.
I guess we'll hop over to news. Speaking of God of War, we were obviously talking about how God of War could possibly be the best game of this generation and how you just can't get it out of your mind. A lot of people couldn't get it out of their mind leading up to the release because it sold 3.1 million units in its first 3 days globally. This is by way of the PlayStation blog. It becomes the fastest selling PS4 exclusive. It toppled Uncharted and the like by quite a bit. Uncharted 4 sold 2.7 million copies in its first weekend, so that's trumped that. It's astounding because God of War sells really well, but to see it sell this well is really crazy. People really bought into this new look for the game. It's how do you feel? Do you think these sales numbers, are they justified? It seems like it, right? It's a great game.
Well, it's a phenomenal game for starters, and obviously one a lot of people have been waiting for a long time. But it's really one of the standout like flagship games that have come over from last gen too. Like Kratos is already a recognizable character, so he's got like 10 years of branding built up, I guess. So for some people, they may have actually finally bought a PS4 for this game. As far as like toppling Uncharted, it's not really that surprising because the install base has grown by how many tens of millions since Uncharted 4 came out.
Exactly.
We're at almost 80 million now, I think, the install base for PS4. So for it only beat Uncharted by like what 500,000 copies or something like that, I think. Or no, I think it was like 2.6 million for Uncharted within its first week, and this did 3.1 million in 3 days. So I guess it was obviously on a way higher trajectory. But yeah, with the install base being higher now, it's not that surprising. And yeah, I think just the game itself is just it's just something you want to play for yourself, because especially if you have played the past games and to see what a departure this is now, you want to kind of get in there and figure out what's going on and what they've changed, and if it's vibing with you. The one interesting thing I will say though about this that really stood out to me is that Sony did almost no previews for this game. Obviously the press did their previews about a month before launch or whatever, but this game was noticeably quiet at events. When I went to PAX a few weeks ago, we assumed it would be there because it was like 3 weeks before God of War was supposed to come out, and what a better way to build up some hype or whatever than have people get really on board and talk about God of War. No, the game was not there. They really never showcased this game publicly at all until like the final month with preview coverage at outlets and stuff like that. Like I don't know if you watched PSX last year or anything either, but a lot of people going into that were expecting like a huge blowout event for PSX, and we'd see so much stuff. And I think they showed like a 90-second trailer. That was all we got.
It was a couch talk essentially. There was
he talked about it for a little bit, and then he showed off a new gameplay clip, and that was like 90 seconds.
And there was a weird back and forth between him and Cory Barlog of like, hey, you should be making the game right now. And he's
yeah.
like, yeah.
So over the course of that game's lifespan, we saw the original reveal trailer and that gameplay from E3 2016. We saw another trailer in E3 2017. We saw like a 90-second clip at PSX, and then the game was pretty much out. So they really did nothing for this game, and it sold that well, which I think says a lot about the confidence that they had in it, that they didn't really necessarily need it to get into people's hands at conventions or anything like that. Like it wasn't playable at E3 last year either, unless you had like an appointment with them behind closed doors or whatever. But yeah, they totally knew what they had on their hands, and they're like, yeah, we're fine. We don't really need to show this off or preview this too hard. We'll do our typical media rounds and stuff like that. And yeah, people are going to get into this. We know people will be into this, and they clearly were.
What's crazy to point out that and see how a lot of their other first-party games, it seems like at this point we're starting to see a little too much before they come out.
Yeah, Spider-Man's like exclusive month-long coverage over on Game Informer and stuff like that. It's like
even Death Stranding is still like 2 years away. Help me out here. The zombie game.
Days Gone.
Days Gone. Where is that at? We've seen that as much as we've seen God of War. Quantum Break isn't out yet, though it's coming out soon.
We've seen the Connor demo for Detroit Become Human probably 1,000 times at this point.
Exactly.
Like Detroit, we've seen like think of like obviously Detroit's been in the public eye a little bit longer, but like think about how much we've seen of Detroit over the years compared to like God of War. Like it's like almost 3-1 probably.
Well, even remember when we saw the Kara demo back when the PS4 launched.
That was I don't even think the PS4 had been. Was it revealed yet? Or
I think it was 2014 when they showed off the Kara demo. Might have been 2013.
Yeah, and it was like showing the power of the hardware or whatever.
Well, the crazy thing too is like the last figures we kind of got were I think 79 million PS4 units. And it's crazy to say like 3.1 million units is impressive and it's the fastest selling PS4 exclusive. Well, a couple of weeks ago we got the news that Nintendo Super Mario Odyssey has sold over 10 million copies and there's 17 million Switches. That is insane. And Nintendo is still the king of attach rates. Like I don't think PlayStation
Breath of the Wild had an over over 100% attach rate I think a month after launch. Yeah. Which is just stupid.
It is insane to show how much people still love Mario and will buy a Nintendo console for Mario specifically.
Yeah.
And Mario Kart. It's crazy. I'm interested to see where the final numbers shake out on God of War. An interesting thing with it is it's a single player game, and I want to see how GameStop returns and stuff affect that of like people trading it in and then a lot of people just buying it used, and how that all shakes out. I don't think it's going to be drastic or anything. I still think God of War is going to sell tremendously, but we're getting people are fighting this reality where, I mean, I've talked about on the podcast before. I have friends who will legitimately look at a game and say, I'm not paying $60 for a game that just has a campaign. And it's shocking to me because obviously I come from the perspective as you and as other people that we talk to is like multiplayer versus single player doesn't matter. The amount of hours you don't spend with it don't matter. It's like, what's the value there in terms of you playing the game and the experience you have?
Yeah.
And it's just so shocking that there are a lot of people who think that way. And there's a reason why games are turning into more multiplayer focused experiences is because people don't want to buy single player games. Whether it's a 40 to 50 hour campaign like God of War where you can put in a bunch of time into it, or it's like an 8-hour campaign, right? It just, people don't want to hear single player because they don't think they're getting value for $60, which is crazy to me. But it is something that's, a reality.
Yeah, I don't even know what to say to that. Those same people will like probably go see a movie for $12 or $15 or whatever, and it's 90 minutes to 2 hours. It's like
exactly. How does that translate?
Yeah, I'm so confused here. If I gauged everything by the amount of time I put into it, then I don't really know what I would pay for, especially if like memberships and things like that. So
yeah, it doesn't that thought process doesn't make sense to me a lot of times. I'm like, what? But it is what it is. Let's hop into the next couple of news stories here. Kind of grouping them up there about games we're going to be seeing at E3. As if you guys didn't know, Logan's actually going to be joining us for one of our predictions podcasts. I believe the Bethesda one, if I'm correct.
I think that's what I said. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, yeah. So he'll be on later, closer to E3, and you'll be able to hear him talk about Bethesda with us. But in terms of what we're going to be seeing, we had a couple of announcements in terms of some games we're going to be seeing. One was an announcement. One was more of like I wouldn't say a leak, just information that popped out regarding CD Projekt Red. But the first one I want to tackle is Remedy Games. Earlier I talked about Quantum Break. We also mentioned Alan Wake. Their P7, their Project 7 that they've been working on, the game that they've kind of just focused on for the last couple of years. It's not going to be an Xbox exclusive, but they did announce that it's going to be revealed at E3 2018 via an earnings call, which is kind of where we hear about a lot of this stuff. They need to talk to their investors and let them know when these games are coming out. This game is being published by 505 Games. In the past, a lot of their games have been published by Microsoft, hence the exclusivity. This one is being published by 505 Games. It's kind of described as a cinematic third-person action game, which is, a Remedy game. Doesn't really say much. That's kind of their MO when it comes to video games. It's set for a release in 2019, which is next year. And they also stated that they have another game in development, which I assume is probably in pre-pro, that they're going to be shifting over to once this game is finished in development. And that one, they haven't really speculated, is that an Xbox exclusive or is it not? They just stated specifically that P7 won't be. They didn't say, like, we're done with our relationship with Xbox or anything. It wasn't like a falling out. It just seemed like they wanted to shift to make something that they could put on all platforms. It's interesting that they kind of, like I previously mentioned, their games are good games. They just don't seem to sell very well.
Yeah, they're pretty niche, honestly. Like, there's an audience for them out there. Like, you and me clearly really appreciate both of their last outings with Alan Wake and Quantum Break. But, and I can understand how it's kind of a niche thing because, again, back to the whole single-player game, not that those are necessarily for one audience of people. Obviously there's a lot of people out there for it that are into it, but their games do play kind of differently, I'll say. Like, it doesn't have the broad appeal of like a first person shooter or something like that. It doesn't like watching footage of it. I could see how people would be like, I don't know if this is for me or anything like that, especially since a lot of their games do hinge on the narrative as well. So if you're not looking for a narrative story, then or narrative story. That's a little redundant. But
that's the thing is, like, we're constantly, and we're going to be talking about Xbox a little later. I would love for Xbox to buy Remedy because I think they are a studio that you can give some more resources. Jesus Christ, I can't talk. Resources behind and make them into a flagship first-party studio making stuff because their games, like the narrative-driven stuff, that can really do well as a first-party exclusive, right? They're a studio that's sitting there, and their games are high quality in terms of production. I think their games come out and they run well, they look beautiful. It's some of the weird choices they make, or some of the genre choices they make in terms of broad appeal. Like Alan Wake was a great game. Horror games don't tend to sell as well as other games, right? In terms of Quantum Break, all of that weird TV stuff they mixed in, though I enjoyed some of it because the TV show aspect of it was a little campy. If they were to have stripped that out and made it a solid game, I do think there's a really cool narrative there with time travel and stuff, and the performances were really well done. And I think that could have been molded into a first-party exclusive that could have turned into something bigger. It just didn't work out really well. So I'm really interested to see where P7 is. I think 505 Games is about the level of publisher you would assume for them to partner with. So it makes sense. I'm excited to see what it is. Like I said, it's funny that they label it as a cinematic third-person action game. It's like, yeah, it's a Remedy game. That doesn't tell us anything, The other bit of news wasn't even released by CD Projekt Red. This was via an E3 2018 exhibitor directory. It listed that CD Projekt Red was going to be showing up with an untitled RPG at E3 2018. Obviously, we assume that that's Cyberpunk 2077. They're not going to be showing off The Witcher 4 because that isn't a thing.
I'm sure it's a thing somewhere on a piece of paper, but that's about it.
It's interesting to see how their licensing is with Witcher 2, and they don't really have as much to go off of because it's tough. I'll just leave it at that. But one of the things that people are questioning is if maybe they changed the title of Cyberpunk 2077, which is an interesting take on them labeling it as Untitled RPG. The easier assumption there is that they didn't want people to know that we're definitely showing off Cyberpunk 2077. They just want to write...
That clearly wasn't even supposed to be released either, because it was scrubbed like hours after people discovered it. If you go to that page right now where it listed that they are showing a role-playing game, it is totally not listed there. So we'll see. It was the other interesting thing. I guess the more interesting thing to me. First I'll touch on the name change. They're totally not changing the name. That game has branding already. Like, believe it or not, their Twitter account has like 110,000 followers. They're not. I don't think they're changing the name at this point. Cyberpunk 2077, even though it is not a great name, it is a known quantity, and I don't think there's any chance that they change the name.
Do you think it would have a subtitle below it though? Do you think it might be Cyberpunk 2077 something?
Because
it doesn't changing it doesn't necessarily mean like removing. It could be adding something or.
Yeah, I mean they could. I guess it's been that name for 5-6 years now, or something like that.
Based off of a single trailer, which is crazy. A single trailer, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. They could, I guess. I don't know. That'd be a way to surprise people, but no. I mean, I don't know. Cyberpunk 2077 for despite only having that one trailer, it is something a fair amount of people are excited for and are looking forward to, and I think it would be strange to change that too much at this point, since people know what the name of the game is. Yeah. As far as I can't remember what the second point, the other thing I was going to say was. Maybe I'll remember in a second.
Release window, maybe?
Yeah. Oh, that's what I was going to say. So it listed for PS4, Xbox One, and PC. A lot of people have theorized that this is probably a next-gen game.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea. I guess as far as like release window goes, I also don't really know that, because I've always been under the impression that this game is still very, very far out, like maybe 2020 at the earliest. But if they're ready to show it off at E3, which I was not expecting until recently, then that will be very interesting. And you'd have to imagine that they're 12 to 18 months from release, especially with the way that, especially with how quiet they've been surrounding the project. You would assume that once they decide to show things off, they are kind of gearing up in that last final stretch there of production. I don't know. What do you think? When do you think it's coming?
There was a report, and I can't remember where exactly it was from, so forgive me for that, for not saying the specific outlet. But they were talking about, like, during an earnings call, apparently, that CD Projekt Red mentioned that this game is coming out by the end of the 2019 fiscal year. So
okay,
that would be like March of 2020.
March of 2020 at the latest. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
And also, they got a lot of funding from the Polish government, and there was a report stating that, like, something about in order to meet the meet the standards for them to get the money or for them to qualify. Or
they just opened a new studio over there. I didn't know if you knew that, but yeah, they
Yeah.
just opened a full new studio that's like
In
totally dedicated to Cyberpunk as far as
Wrocław, Poland. I'm probably saying that city
Yeah.
wrong. To fully focus on it. And I guess in order to meet the Polish government's demands or whatever in terms of getting the funding, they have to meet a specific like a release date. In an optimistic grand world, I would love to see this come out spring of next year. My guess is that it's slated for fall 2019 and gets pushed to spring of 2020. That's what my assumption would be. The dreamer in me wants spring 2019. There's people that think this game is coming out this year, which are crazy.
No,
My thing is that I think CD Projekt Red is smart, and I think that they wouldn't show off this game this year unless they could put some form of 2019 on the date, right? The release window.
Yeah.
Because whether you release it in January of 2019 or December of 2019, it still feels like only a year away from E3, right? To the general consumer. So I don't think they would show it this year unless they knew they were going to be able to put that 2019 on it. Like I said, my assumption is that it's 2019 fall and it gets pushed to spring because that's how big games like that tend to work. Like I said, the optimist in me would love spring 2019, but I just don't see that happening personally.
Yeah. The second they open this can of worms and actually finally start talking about this game a little bit more is the second when people are going to be all over the release date thing.
Also,
so I agree with you. I think whenever they do decide to show it off, that it has to be 2019 probably.
Yeah.
Because people have accepted that we're in this just kind of middle ground with this game right now. And we'll know about it when we know about it because that's how it's been for 5 years. But the second they finally come back and they're like, okay, here it is. Here's gameplay. Here's the next trailer. Here's this, and this. People are going to be like, oh gosh, when can I get my hands on this? When can I play this? And then if you say coming soon or there's no release date, that's when people will get agitated. Though it's like people are going to play this game regardless. Like sci-fi game for the people who did The Witcher. Okay, that's a very quick, easy selling point for me. Thank you very much. I will happily buy that game. So.
Well, and so people have been talking about where this game is going to show up during E3. A couple of things I want to say. One, people think that all of these like random third-party AAA games are going to appear on Sony stage. If you look at their track record the last couple of years, they don't really even have room for a lot of games. They have all of their first-party lineup. They usually include Call of Duty, obviously, and then they usually have a big Japanese game, a third-party game, whether that be the Kingdom Hearts of the world, the Final Fantasy remakes, or Monster Hunter World that we saw last year. I assume that this year we'll see Devil May Cry if that's real, Kingdom Hearts 3 hopefully, and then Call of Duty. Concerning Cyberpunk, there's a really strong relationship between Xbox and the guys at CD Projekt Red. They announced Gwent on their stage. A lot of times when there's things announced for Gwent, they come up on the Xbox blog and stuff, and obviously it's whatever, but it seems like the last couple of years they've had a working relationship with one another, and I could definitely, like, if you said you have to make a decision and put your life savings on where this is going to end up, I would put my money on Microsoft 100%. I think that's the strongest place to guess that we're going to see it at. It's just that Sony is so focused on its own first-party stuff, and they don't even show a lot of their own games. They put them in the pre-show, and they're not really interested in showing a lot of indies anymore. They're just very tight and focused on their show. And I think outside of like Devil May Cry 5, Kingdom Hearts, and Call of Duty, I don't know if they'll fit in anything or want to fit in anything. They have the marketing rights to Red Dead if Rockstar decided to show up to E3 for once. But like I definitely think Cyberpunk is going to be on Microsoft stage, 100%.
I think it's a good bet. I think it's something that if Microsoft would obviously, both publishers would obviously be keyed in if they knew that they were going to reveal it soon. I don't know. I think Microsoft makes the most sense. I agree with you there. Whether or not they end up pulling them over or not, we'll see. But yeah, maybe they have pretty good relationships with those European developers. Isn't the team at Metro, aren't they from Europe?
Yep. Remedy is also from Europe.
There you go.
So,
yeah, they got that European market over there.
Well,
Microsoft
they also have a couple of first party studios in Europe as well. The guys behind Forza and
Yeah,
stuff. So
the Lionhead used to be there, obviously.
he
But
used to, yeah.
yeah.
It just
What is Turn 10 over there?
yeah,
Is
turn
that
10
what you're
is
saying? Turn 10, and then there's somebody else I thought over there. Maybe I'm wrong.
a Rare. Rare's also European.
Yeah, that's right. Duh.
Yeah, so I definitely think Cyberpunk's going to be on Microsoft stage, but we'll see. Speaking of Xbox, though, I wanted to cover this, but I kind of want to get to our big topic, so we're just going to go over this quickly.
Okay.
Speaking of the E3 conference for Xbox, somebody tweeted to Phil Spencer and said, "Are we going to see JRPGs on your stage this year?" And Phil Spencer replied, "As of now, yes. Things can change, but like last year, I wanted to make sure we supported our Japanese publishers on our stage, and this year we are working to do the same. It's important to us." So that's cool. We're going to be seeing JRPGs. Are they new games? Are they ports? We don't know. There's some rumors floating around that it could possibly be a Nier Automata port. Cool. That'd be really cool. That game saw a lot of success and people love that game. Is it a new JRPG? I mean, they own Blue Dragon. They own Lost Odyssey. Could it be a sequel to one of those? Maybe. It's weird. The whole situation with Scalebound, people felt that like Microsoft was done dealing with Japanese publishers and developers. That's not the case. Also, Code Vein to some extent is also a Japanese RPG. We haven't seen that. That's obviously from Bandai Namco. That's the anime-inspired Dark Souls game that's meant to come out this year. We still haven't seen it. So it's cool to hear that they're gonna have JRPGs. Whether or not, we don't know it's ports or new games. So it's like, man, it's a toss-up. But it's cool to see Phil Spencer acknowledge that. Also, kind of cover his tracks and say, things change, so maybe not. But as of now, because those things get shuffled around and you don't know what you want to include and stuff like that. And we really don't know how late rights to stuff gets bought up in terms of marketing and stuff, So there could be things that you include and then, oh, sorry, we can't include that because rights went somewhere else. And it's like, oh, we can't, I think a lot of this stuff isn't necessarily up to the last 10 minutes of E3, but I think there's a lot of stuff that gets shuffled around leading up to the week of that we just don't even think about. So it's interesting. I don't know how much weight that holds for you, Japanese RPGs being on the Xbox stage this year.
Yeah, not shocking. Because we know how much Phil has tried to continue to bridge that relationship over there, or bridge that gap over there, and improve that relationship. It seems like the Xbox in Japan's never going to be a thing, but it doesn't help to at least try to play nice with the Japanese developers and publishers so that they can bring the game to Western markets at the very least. I think Nier's a good shot because they were never really against that. After how positive, I'm pretty sure this is going way back in the bank, because I remember reporting on a story about this last year. But one of the producers of Nier back in the day said something along the lines of the reason that they didn't bring it to Xbox was just because they didn't want to split time up between two versions of the game or something like that. And even though it is pretty much a straight port from one console to the other, it still takes up a fair amount of time. And that was basically the only reason that they didn't do it. Yeah. Seeing how well it sold and seeing that it has been Platinum Games' guiding light, it would make total sense for them to bring it to Xbox as well because that's a rather large install base. It totally makes sense for that game to come to Xbox. I've actually been thinking that should happen sooner rather than later. And then, I don't know what there's Black Desert Online too. I know that's an MMO,
Yakuza is another good choice. The Yakuza series.
I don't think those will ever come over. I really don't.
I'm just throwing out.
Yeah, they would be good, but those are more action games anyway. I don't know if I'd say those are JRPGs, but I don't know. Yeah, Nier makes the most sense. And then, like I said, Black Desert's another one that I know of that's an MMO, but still, I don't know. They showed that last year on their stage, so
give me Tales of Berseria.
There you go.
I think those are already on Xbox, maybe. I don't know. I'm not super familiar with the Tales series. I can't remember
if Tales... I think
one of them, I think, is. Yeah. Before we hop into the last news of Red Dead Redemption 2, kind of details coming out after the third trailer released, there's a couple of stats here from the Xbox blog I want to touch on real quick. They reported that Xbox Live players are up 13%. Xbox One sales are up 15% over the same period last year. So those are both good trends. 1.2 million clubs were created on Xbox Live. Obviously, that's a new feature that they launched, I want to say 2 years ago on E3 stage. I'm talking about clubs and letting people create their own little communities on Xbox Live. 1 billion hours in Xbox One backward compatibility, showcasing that people do in fact play their old games on their system, which is really cool. Obviously, it's one of the better things that Xbox has going for it is the ability to put in an Xbox 360 game or even an Xbox game now and have it work on your console. As of the day of recording this, they recently added Dragon Age 2 to the backwards compatibility. Though that isn't a tremendously great game, it's still cool, another addition to the backwards compatibility library. And lastly, 200 plus games now with Xbox One X enhancements, which is really cool to showcase that so many people are behind, improving the performance of their games for these systems, these powerful systems, these incremental, powerful boys.
Yeah.
I don't think there's much to say there. Just some cool numbers. There's some other stuff with Mixer, but who cares? Let's talk about.
I mean, I guess well, just real quick on that. The one thing I will say. It's been nice kind of getting back in the Xbox ecosystem because I bought my Xbox One X and I've definitely found myself trending in that direction a little bit more to play recently over the past 6 months. So that's been nice. I've actually really enjoyed kind of sinking back way more time into my Xbox than I was in the past, at least. So that's been good. I am enjoying Xbox quite a bit right now, and they're doing well for themselves, even though they get a lot of hate on the interwebs, and I don't really understand why. But Xbox is doing good.
I have a question for you because you own both systems. It might be different because you own an Xbox One X, so this isn't maybe apples to apples. Unless you own a PS, do you own a PS4 Pro or a PS4?
Yeah, I own a Pro too.
Okay, so from what I've heard, and obviously I don't own a PS4, so I don't know. All I know is my experience with my Xbox. My Xbox is relatively quiet. I hear a lot that the PS4s have a volume issue sometimes in terms of being loud.
Oh yeah, that thing gets real loud when I'm playing God of War.
That's crazy.
Very loud.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like PS2 loud back in the day or anything like that, but you can hear it for sure. Yeah.
It's just funny because I think Xbox really took the Red Ring to heart.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, not anymore.
We need an internal cooling system in this thing. Get some of that weird vapor cooling or whatever the heck that thing is.
Yeah. The last news story here before we close out the show, Red Dead Redemption 2 had its third and final trailer this week. People thought it was going to maybe show actual gameplay with the HUD and stuff or multiplayer stuff. It didn't. It was just another cinematic story trailer showing off more of the game. Some key points I want to touch on. Whenever you want to interject, feel free to, Logan, and then we'll kind of go over in general our anticipation for Red Dead Redemption 2 and what we expect of it. First off, the trailer featured a younger John Marston with cuts on his face. Obviously, in Red Dead Redemption, he has scars on his face, and these are kind of showing where he gets those cuts, which is really cool. It was also the first reveal, it was the first reveal of John Marston in Red Dead Redemption 2, correct? This is the first time we had official confirmation.
Yeah, I think we all knew he'd be in it because this is the first time we've seen him.
Yeah, we also get a glimpse of the potential main villain of the game, which is this bald, very entitled-looking gentleman who looks like he's part of the law, and obviously the main enemy of cowboys is the law. And yeah, it's played by an actor who's, I wouldn't say he's famous, but I would say he's definitely a known character actor. It seems like it's played by him. We haven't had any confirmation, but it definitely looks like him. Looks like it was mocap. It was also revealed via IGN's stories that came out after the trailer. They got an exclusive on some details regarding Red Dead Redemption 2, that there's not going to be any protagonist swapping. So if you remember in GTA 5, it was known for having the three main characters, Michael, Franklin, and Trevor, and you were able to switch to them. They all had individual story missions and met up with one another at certain instances in the main storyline. You're not doing that in this game. You're playing as Arthur Morgan, and solely Arthur Morgan. Is that surprising to you, Logan, or were you like, yeah, they probably wouldn't go back to that?
It's not. I don't know if I'd say it's surprising. It's something I'm personally happy about because I didn't really. The longer I played GTA, the less I really liked the swapping thing. So yeah, I'm glad it'll hone in on one character this time around.
Yeah. A couple of the other bullet points here aren't necessarily a game-changing. There's stuff you would assume in the evolution of Rockstar open world game. But I do want to touch on the last two things. So the Outlaw Camp, you've seen it featured in a couple of the Red Dead Redemption 2 trailers. It's, everyone out at a camp in the middle of a forest or in the middle of a desert, and there's a big fire and there's a lot of people around it. In the latest trailer, you actually saw a glimpse of it panning around to all the different characters surrounding the fire, which seems like they're going to be your gang. And basically, this is your mobile hub in the game. So you're not going to be necessarily hunkering down at a specific location, like a house or anything like that. This is going to be the way you move because the game has been described as you on a chase across the Outlands. It's you running from the man from the law. And basically, the camp, you can contribute supplies to it by fishing, by hunting, by gathering wood. I'm assuming by cutting down trees or something. It mentioned wood in the story. A couple of other things. You can basically contribute supplies to the camp, maybe help it function better, maybe to heal you. I'm not necessarily sure what's the point, but they also mentioned that if you don't contribute or if you contribute a lot, NPCs will let you know either way how they feel about that. So if you're not really contributing to the camp in terms of supplies, the other guys will let you know that you're not doing your best to chip in to help everybody out, which is pretty interesting. A mobile hub, does that fit in for you? What you think Red Dead Redemption 2 is going to be, being on the move the entire time?
It's not what I was envisioning, and I don't really know. Obviously, you just explained it all there. I don't really. It's one of those things I want to see for myself and see how I really feel about it. I'll have to spend some time with the game before I really understand how it's working and how they're gonna use that system. Before I really know if it's something I want or not. Doesn't sound bad by any means, but yeah, I just got to see how it's utilized, I guess, before I can really pass a judgment on it either way. But
the way I assume it works is that this is going to be a colossal world, right? A giant open world. And I think essentially and this is just me throwing out random guesses of how I think it's going to play out, is I think the outlaw camp is less of as you move through the story, it's in a set location. I really think it's just going to be save points. So like you can only set up camp in certain locations, not specific locations, but like not too close to dangerous areas. And that's basically your save point. And I think a large chunk of the game is you outrunning the law. And I think there comes a point where the tides turn or something happens to where you do eventually have a location in the game, right? Like a set house or something. But I think it's just going to function as a movable save point that functions as a camp as well. I could be wrong. It could be that like it moves as the story progresses. So like as long as you don't do a main story mission, the camp doesn't really move forward. It's very weird. The way they're describing it as a mobile hub, it's tough to see how it's going to play out. But like you said, we'll see how it works out. Hopefully, we'll probably get more of an explanation. Rockstar has a tendency to release videos with a narrator describing exactly what you can do in the game. This is Red Dead Redemption 2.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if we see first gameplay at E3, like you said. Even if it's, I don't expect that game itself to be there, but I think it makes sense for them to show up on Sony's stage.
Yeah, they did. They did show up when they were announcing the ports of GTA 5.
They did, yeah. And it was rumored for a long time that they were going to show up in, was it 2016 and show the game off?
Yeah.
At E3, and then they obviously it was all rumor. I don't think it was ever confirmed, but supposedly they pulled out at like the last second.
If I remember correctly, it was either E3 or PSX that they were rumored to show it, but then the Orlando shooting happened.
That's right. I think that's
and
what it
people
was,
anticipated that they didn't want to show it because of that. I don't remember if that was PSX or E3 because I don't remember when the Orlando shooting took place.
It was E3. Yeah, okay, it was in June. So,
the last thing I want to talk about is the new horse mechanics. So they basically talked about in the IGN article that Rockstar kind of felt that the horses were over. What's the word I'm looking for here? Gamified. They were over gamified in Red Dead Redemption. And basically what they said is that you're going to have a relationship with your horse in this game. You're going to have to ride them, feed them, and groom them so you can build a bond with them and build a friendship. And the stronger that bond is, it's probably like a meter or something that lets you know. Your horse will be less likely to run from intense situations or hectic situations involving like shootouts with other NPCs or predators like bears or wolves or stuff like that. And the thing is if your bond is weak and your horse does run, it does carry supplies with it and some weapons on it, so it's kind of like another thing that's moving around with you that's carrying items for you. So if it runs away, you could lose that stuff. They didn't really specify if you lose it permanently or like you just don't have it until you get your horse back, because like if your horse runs away and dies in a forest, you don't know where the horse dies, you just lose that stuff. And speaking of that, if your horse dies, you actually have to rebuild that trust with the new horse over again. And you and I were kind of talking before the show of like, that's going to be an interesting balance, because that's something that can get really tedious really quickly if you're constantly having to build up a relationship with a horse. And like I mentioned to you, I assume there's going to be some kind of RPG thing where maybe later in the game it's easier for you to build that bond quicker with a newer horse, because late game you don't want to have somebody going out of their way to build up a relationship with the horse. It just seems like something that might get easier as the game progresses. But I'm really hoping they balance it out correctly, because reading it, it's like, oh, that sounds awesome because it's another thing you kind of have to worry about. But in the same breath, it's like, oh, that's another thing I have to worry about, you know? So,
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think about this?
Again, one of those things I kind of want to see play out, because it could be an annoying mechanic in the game, depending on how it's utilized. I imagine that Rockstar will know where that line is, though, and it will probably be, in a perfect world, it'll be something that we're very happy that they added, and it, like, actually you do feel like a relationship and bond to that horse, which means when it dies, then you feel that much more torn up and upset about it. But we'll see. Yeah, I don't know. I think it sounds interesting. It reminds me of when they put out San Andreas, and they're like, oh, if you eat too much, your character can get fat, and then you got to run around and lose the weight,
Yeah.
and like that kind of stuff. It reminds me of that, which I also know that element of San Andreas was kind of hit and miss with some people. So we'll see how this is. I think it sounds interesting at the very least. I'll just have to see how they execute on it.
Yeah. I think that's it for Red Dead Redemption 2. I think we're both optimistic about it. I think it's going to be a really solid game. I'm interested to see how good it exactly is.
That new trailer really didn't do much for me, just because it was kind of a third trailer of what I felt like we had already seen. But I am still nonetheless like very, very excited to play that. I will be there day one playing Red Dead Redemption 2, just like I'm sure many other people will. That game is going to be huge. So huge, in fact, that Call of Duty pushed early this year to October, which is kind of insane because they have not done that in, I think, like 12 years or something like that. Yeah. Call of Duty has not released outside of November in, I think, 12 years. So, yeah.
We actually talked about it. Yeah, it's the first year since 2007, I think. Yeah, 11 years that it hasn't released in November. There's a lot of hyperbole that a lot of people think this game is going to sell as well as GTA 5. It won't. No. It'll sell really well. It will not put up GTA 5 numbers.
GTA 5 is like... No, and I don't really see anything touching that like anytime soon. I don't know. That game is in a very I don't know. We could have a whole conversation about that game and its sales, but the way it came out kind of in between generations, it got the whole install base of the PS3 and 360 at the moment, and then it kind of has grown along this generation. That game is a total sales anomaly. Nothing will ever do what that game ever did ever again.
Yeah, in terms of, I think, big AAA polished game, because like there's games that have sold more than it, but you have the Tetrises, which have like a million different versions. You have Minecraft, which is more of an indie-ish game that's on a ton of platforms. Mm-hmm. And then like the way they group up Pokemon and stuff, like there's some games that have like technically sold more copies, but in terms of like a AAA release and profit, like that's the thing, is it's profited more than anything. It hasn't necessarily sold more units than any other game. It's obviously in the top echelon of that, but
it's
due to
the biggest single
microtransactions
piece of media in history, right?
Entertainment, yes, exactly.
Yeah, so
which says something. I think that's it for the podcast. In terms of what we're going to be playing, finishing Wolfenstein 2 finally. Really love that game. After I finish it, I'm debating on whether or not to start up the Banner Saga, because I started up a long time ago, and then I just didn't. Got distracted by something. I really like that game. I don't know if you've ever played it, but like I love the art style, and the story is really engaging. If you're a fan of fantasy, whether that be like Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings or anything like that, it definitely
it's a strategy game, correct?
Yes, it's a turn-based strategy game.
That's why I haven't done it. I'm not the hugest strategy guy in the world.
Me neither. But the aesthetic and the characters make it for me, and I push past that. Kind of like the same thing I'm doing with Into the Breach. I've been playing that on and off again too on PC. Definitely not my type of game in terms of like what I would naturally go to, but just done so well that I'm super into it. I might start playing some more Darkest Dungeon too. I got off of that train a while back. I love that game.
The game stressed me out too much, which I know is what it's supposed to do, but yeah.
And I own State of Decay. I've never beat the game. I've played it quite a bit, and I'm thinking of starting it up and trying to finish it before State of Decay 2 comes out. I considered
doing that as well, but I don't want to get any potential fatigue beforehand. Like,
Yeah.
so I'm kind of trying to stay away from it. Actually.
I think honestly it would be good to turn on and play maybe the first hour and a half, if I'm being quite honest. Because not that you shouldn't finish the game, but in terms of fatigue, but I do think you should at least play a little bit of it so you can appreciate how much better State of Decay 2 is in a lot of areas.
I played it for probably 2 or 3 hours back on the 360 back in the day, but that felt like I was just barely scratching the surface.
Yeah, I think it's just have a little bit of a touch with it to see how much of improvement State of Decay 2 is. I think is beneficial. So if you already have that, that's fine. It's just one of those things like maybe I'll play it. You kind of get those when sequels come out, right? It's like maybe I should play the thing before it comes out. Like all those crazy people who marathon God of War, even though it's like completely different tone and stuff. But just to get themselves hyped. In terms of anything else, I might go watch Infinity War again this weekend. Not too sure if I want to go again. Not that I don't like the movie, but
I've been thinking about that myself. Yeah, I don't know. I might. I don't see the Marvel movies twice very often.
I don't see any movie twice. I don't think I've ever gone to the theater twice for a single movie.
I usually go see Star Wars like 3 or 4 times when those come out.
True. I watched Last Jedi twice, and I also watched Force Awakens twice, so I'm a liar.
Are you okay? So are you?
I'm
going
thumbs
to
up
see
on.
Solo?
I'm thumbs up on Last Jedi. I'm not down on Thumbs Jedi.
I was thumbs up on Jedi, and it is slowly turning to the side. I don't think it's bad, and it'll never be a thumbs down. But I am having way more questions about what's going to happen next, and I have way more concerns following that movie than I did after seeing it opening night.
The thing is I'm one of the few people that I know that actually like Last Jedi. Even saying that, I would have loved if they just committed to JJ and just let him do all 3 movies. Like, I would have really enjoyed to see what that was. I understand why they didn't, but we can go on a whole tangent. What were we saying about Solo, though?
Thing. Are you going to see it?
Yeah. So here's the thing. Solo, I'm not a Solo guy. Like, he's not one of my favorite Star Wars characters. I know that's, like, blasphemous to a lot of people because tons of people love Solo.
Nah, it's all about Luke.
Honestly, I've never really been a Solo fan, and I don't really like Harrison Ford's acting. And I know that sounds crazy, but I've never liked his acting ability, ever. I just don't like the way he acts. He's one of those, I think it happens for a lot of people where there's a specific actor where you only see the actor and it's hard to see the character. Some people have that with Johnny Depp. Some people have that with certain people. For me, I just see Harrison Ford. I've never liked the Han Solo character. But I'm interested because I love Donald Glover to pieces. Lando is awesome, and I think he's going to nail that. And I do think Woody Harrelson is a great actor. I love Emilia Clarke. I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan. I do think there are a lot of pieces in that movie that can make it serviceable and good. I just think that in a lot of ways Last Jedi was. I think it's going to be a toxic wasteland of fandom, no matter how good the movie actually is or bad the movie actually is. I think that there's a lot of toxic culture surrounding Star Wars in terms of the community. And,
Last Jedi really brought that out, didn't it? So
yeah.
I'm
excited to watch it though. I'll just say that.
I don't think I'm going to see it, as weird as that is. And I am like #1 Star Wars boy, or at least I was. I still am. I still love Star Wars. I have hated this movie since the concept was greenlit. I was like, we don't need this. We don't need a Han Solo movie. We don't need any of this. In fact, I think it undermines his character to flesh out his backstory that much more, because I think it is so cool that we just, in episode 4, run across this random kind of scummy dude in a bar, and now all of a sudden our protagonists are chilling with this dude and his bear friend. Like, I think fleshing out his backstory just really undermines his character in the original trilogy. Yeah. Every trailer I see, I don't think looks good. Everything I've seen about this movie, it's not just the idea, like the things that I've seen for it too, I think look really not great. Like, and even the Woody Harrelson being like, "Oh, we're putting together a team." It's like, oh my gosh, this is the most like
cookie cutter by the numbers.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen this movie already. So I will hate it regardless if I was to go to see it. So I think I'm just not going to go see it, and then I think I am going to maybe just see it when it comes out on Blu-ray or something like that, and see if distance from the release of it can help me to watch it in a more objective state of mind. Because I just feel like I am not going to be into it. I also feel like it's important to me. I think Star Wars is getting a little pimped out too much, and I feel like I should not go see this movie and support it, because I don't want them to continue greenlighting 1,000 sequels, even though they've already kind of done that. So guess it's a little bit too late for that. Yeah, the Star Wars pipeline's getting kind of crazy. I feel like it's starting to mean less and less, and it is just becoming I don't know. It's something that I'm not looking forward to as much as I used to, which is kind of sad. So.
Yeah. I mean, I'd pay $10 to see Donald Glover in anything. So even if it's not a good movie,
that's the only positive is Donald Glover, because I'm right there with you. I love everything he does, from Atlanta to his rap stuff to whatever. I love him in Atlanta.
I love his rap music. I loved him in The Martian. He had a very small role in that, but I loved him.
Yeah, he was good in that.
Loved him in Spider-Man: Homecoming. I really like Donald Glover, so I'll go see I'll pay $10 to see him on screen. The dude came from YouTube, and it's awesome, like Derek comedy and stuff, and it's just great to see. That guy is so talented. It is insane how talented that guy is.
He's a renaissance man for sure.
Exactly. I think that's it for this week's show. Logan, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on the internet, Twitter, I guess, at Moreman12. And if you want to follow any of my writing, you can go read DualShockers.com, and I'll say hey to you over there.
And so he's going to be going to E3 this year to cover it for DualShockers, and he's also going to be on the Predictions podcast with us. So definitely when E3 comes around, he'll be on the podcast, and definitely you'll be able to see all of his experiences with all of the games he gets to see at E3, which will be cool. So thank you again, Logan, for joining me.
Yeah, man, no problem.
For those listening, if you haven't already, follow us on iTunes, leave a rating. I know it's time-consuming, but it helps. Believe me, it helps. Even one review helps. Subscribe to us on YouTube. We're putting up more video content there. Like I said, I have a Monster Prom impressions up there. I'm going to be uploading the Lightfall impressions later this week. And the A Look Back At is going to be coming back. Obviously you wouldn't know, Logan, but a couple of weeks ago I had like the worst internet outage in my neighborhood. So I didn't have internet for like 2 weeks. So I kind of I lost time with editing and stuff like that, so I had to kind of work twice as hard to get everything back in line. So Look Back At is going to be coming back and be on regular schedule every other Thursday. Logan will be on that in the future. Count on that. And that's pretty much it. Sure. Next week we should have Jordan and Dom back, and in the coming weeks, like I said, we will be having our E3 predictions podcast where we're going to be talking about everything that probably won't happen, but we hope it does. Catch you guys next week. Bye.